Ask the Podcast Coach for September 18th, 2021.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means, hey, it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Cullison from the AverageGuy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. And I'm here with the Dave Garofalo. Two guys smoke shops here in New Hampshire.
There you go.
Welcome. Good to have you back.
Oh, honored you came to visit.
Yeah.
And glad to be on Ask the Podcast Coach. Dave Jackson, thank you so much.
Oh, glad to have you, buddy. That's an amazing room that Jim is in. He's got this whole studio, and you'll hear the voice of God, better known as Ed.
Ed Sullivan's with us as well. Ed, say hi.
I'm just the disembodied voice over at the board.
Which is really
Dave,
fun.
Even though we're here, right? Even though we're
Right,
somewhere else, we're still super thirsty. So can you?
We need to hook you up with some
Can
coffee.
you support us with the coffee?
Absolutely. And of course, that coffee pour is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. If you need a logo, if you need podcast artwork, if you need a whole stinking website, if you need if you go branding, what's branding? If you need an audit, then go over to podcastbranding.co. And I believe, if I remember right, the logo that Dave has on his mug there is created by the one and only Mark over at podcastbranding.co. And
let me grab it, Dave. We're gonna
zoom in.
Yeah,
there it is. The Cigar Authority logo, once again, created by the lovely, the talented Mark over at podcastbranding.co. So if you need to look professional, and I was doing something last night. I found a new tool called VoiceForm, and I had to upload my logo. And every time I upload my logo, I'm like, thank you, Mark. I look so much better than I used to. So if you need it, go over to podcastbranding.co and tell him that Jim and Dave sent you.
You know, we...
There we go.
We had it for 11 years, the same logo we had for 11 years. And I heard the ad on this show, and I said, it's time to freshen this thing up. Yeah. And so it's not just somebody looking for a logo that never had one before. Your logo is most likely used up and old.
And you put that really everywhere, right?
Now, because it looks good, because the other one we kind of threw together ourselves 12 years ago. Yeah. And now it looks cool, and it is professional.
Yeah. Yeah. Dave, we should give some credit to our friends over Dan Lefebvre over at True Story Podcast, based on a truestorypodcast.com. If you're looking for a podcast to listen to, you can actually see it here, which is pretty great. So Dan, of course, if you're looking for a podcast that really talks about, anything based on a true story, was it really? Dan talks about it. So Dan, thanks for sponsoring the mug as well. Dave Jackson. I'm gonna have to start saying Dave Jackson, Dave Garofalo.
Better than two Johns, I guess.
This is gonna be a challenge. You were in the pre-show. You were mentioning, of course, the Cigar Authority has been a very successful podcast, right? I mean, thousands, tens of thousands, tens of thousands, and yet you run one of the largest cigar retail outlets in the world. And it has flip-flopped that I am the guy from the Cigar Authority podcast and not the guy that did everything he did for 36 years to build the empire I built. No, it's this. This is what it is. And as much as it's very nice that it's this, it's almost like, really? You can't believe the amount of work I did for that. And this is what I'm known for. But do you think, does Cigar Authority become what it is if the retail outlet isn't what it is?
Would that have happened? I don't know. I don't know. And what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? The other way around. Would it have built my business, or did my business build my podcast? Yeah. Or did it have nothing to do with each other? I don't know.
Yeah. You can't go back. But I seem to think, well, and you guys were an overnight success that took 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Let's say Dave knows. It was 2010 for me. I didn't go 2005, but 2010, people said, podcast? what? How do I do that? How do I, so the beginning part was horrible.
Yeah.
Well, and your topic with your demographic of cigar smokers skews a lot older.
Anyway, right.
Anyway, so it wasn't like he was doing a tech podcast. Most of his target audience hadn't figured things out way back then.
Well, I mean, the podcast industry has matured in that time as well. Like lots more opportunities, whether it's a Clubhouse, we'll talk about that in a little bit, or even on the social media sites, getting Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, some of those haven't grown. Dave Jackson, as we think about, I mean, certainly there are those in the podcasting space who have retail outlets behind them and then use those as powerful tools to continue to promote their product. But it really, as I was hanging out, we had a little after show, after party probably last night. And there's folks there, Dave Jackson, from all over, Michigan, Montana, California, and a great opportunity, to bring folks in that aren't your local customers.
Right. And we do have an online presence, thank God.
Right.
But when building the podcast, I thought I was going local, and I'm driving people to the store. Little did I know it was worldwide.
Right.
And so now we have to change gear a little bit and talk a little different to people instead of giving the address of the store, which we stopped doing a long time ago because it doesn't matter. Maybe we give the web address. That's all.
Yeah. Dave Jackson, you want to add anything to that?
Well, I just think it's amazing, again, for anyone who just kind of popped in, for lack of a better phrase, you guys are in Boston, and to come from Montana, I mean, it's like the complete opposite side of the country. That's pretty amazing. So.
And I was telling
they took their vacation in order to do it because our show was on, our event we did was on Thursday. They show up on Wednesday, and they're coming for the show today on Saturday. So this was actually, it breaks my heart actually that they saved their 1 week paid vacation for me, and I'm like, I'm sorry. And the guy comes with his wife, and I'm like, I don't know what to say besides I'm sorry. And she said, are you kidding me? We like it. So I don't know. It's weird.
The last night, the folks from Montana who brought the beverages, we'll say, he owns a liquor store, and he was asking me some questions about starting a podcast. And then I said, he's like, no, there's probably not that many liquor podcasts. And I was like, yeah, there's
a lot.
There's actually quite a few. I said, but that shouldn't stop
you,
right?
Find the niche or the different thing, because there wasn't a lot of cigar podcasts, that's for sure, but there is now.
Yeah.
And it's no problem. I know them all, and we're all friendly, and they do it differently than we do it. And I listen to theirs, and they listen to mine. They make believe like they don't listen to mine, but I know you're listening to mine. Yeah.
Well, and you have, oftentimes you feature guests that are in the industry, but sometimes, I mean, you've brought in other influencers, or you're going,
from comedians to athletes, and
and even some folks that may be in your space, right? Some influencers or some other retailers. You've been on other retailer podcasts, right? So, that works. It's in this industry, it still works to kind of do some cross promotion.
Listen, maybe their audience doesn't listen to my show, so I go on their show, and the same vice versa or something, and they'll decide at that point. It doesn't have to be them or us. It can be both. So they can do that.
Yeah, I always say it's not radio where you're both on at 7:30. You know what I mean? It's like you can listen to Dave on Monday and listen to this other guy on Tuesday. And if there's another cigar one, listen to that on Wednesday. I think right now the average podcast listener listens to 6 episodes a week. So something like that. And we always try to figure out, are they saying 6 episodes or 6 shows? There's a difference in that.
Right.
But it's not radio. And by all means. And the other thing is, when you kind of make friends with and I'm going to put up air quotes here, competition, who else can you geek out about with cigars? When I hang out with Daniel J. Lewis or, Ray Ortega or Jim or anybody, we all geek out on podcasts. And, if you cut those people out of your network, you're missing an opportunity to, find out, they may know something or bring something different to the table. So that's cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you guys had like 400 people there last night? Was that the
420?
420.
So talk about a little bit what it takes. And, so this is with a quarter of those folks being from out of town.
Yeah.
We think that's Ed. That's
Yeah,
what you think
about
the number is?
25%.
And that's much more than it's been in the past.
Oh yeah, this was obvious to me before Ed said it to me and said, "Ask a question." I went on stage and asked a question, and they raised their hand. I'm like, "Wow!" And at that point, it clicked, and I said, "Okay, this is not about the retail store. This is the cigar. This is the podcast. It is now morphing into more podcast than it is the store, I think."
So knowing that now, like you're seeing the trend happening where you're like, okay, we've got the podcast, we've got this event, they're starting to blend.
Yes.
Right. They're starting to blend. When you think about future facing audience engagement, what maybe do you think about differently in the future?
So with my 36th anniversary, my 8th anniversary is when I started celebrating the anniversary of the store. I said, "Oh my God, I did this 8 years in a row. I'm going to start telling people now it's 36. Maybe it's time for the Cigar Authority to say, okay, it's been 12 years.
Yeah.
So can we have some sort of, like what happened last night, a little get together or something, as opposed to them coming up for the show, or do I mix them both together?" This is all talk 30 minutes ago of having the conversation of what should I do? I don't know what to do, but it'll be discussed and we'll figure out what to do, and some long-term goal to say, okay, what I like to do, by the way, anyway, is to start something and then make it an annual thing. All the work that goes into the first one, and then you throw it away and you never do the thing again. Well, if you do it properly, it can be an annual thing. That's even episodes on my podcast. If I get a good podcast show, a good subject, it becomes the annual whatever, cigar of the year, the annual this, or whatever, and it makes life easy. I have to fill 52 weeks. So if I can get, 25% of those annual shows, beautiful, makes life easier. And people start looking forward to those things too. We have for the same thing that happens on our event that we did. It's always in mid-September that we have our event. The tickets go on sale the first Saturday of May. They sell out one day. It's always the same. Yeah. So people are saying yesterday, "Oh my God, I have to go next year. When are you putting tickets on sale for a Saturday in May?" And that's it. And it's always the same.
Because I was going to ask about that. How far in advance do you start promoting that? Because this isn't one of those things where you you do it a couple weeks beforehand, but you might be able to pull that off. Holy cow, that's amazing. But it is in May, and the event's in September. So that gives you plenty of time to sell tickets if you're not in. And really, when it comes down to, well, do we celebrate the store and then do we celebrate the podcast? And it's all about your bandwidth, because every time you do one of those things, it's more setup, it's more promotion, so that's where you could have them all together. This one big giant, let's celebrate the store and the podcast. I don't know if you want to do the cigar of the year, you could have this big, huge blowout. But then it's like you said, it's kind of cool. You have Christmas and then you have your birthday. I always felt bad for the guy that was, born on, I dated a girl once that was born December 24th. So she's like, I get gypped totally. Whereas if you have multiple events kind of at different times of the year, it gives you another chance to ramp it up. But if you get too many of those, then you get burned out. You're like, oh, I got to plan another event.
Here's the thing that occurred to me, right? You sold 420 tickets. You could sell 1,000.
Yeah, of course. There's not enough room for
If you combine these things, now the podcast people are pushing out the retail people in terms of what you can accommodate.
Yeah.
So that sort of says to me, it makes sense to separate them out, make sure the retail people all get their tickets they want for this show, and then move the Cigar Authority people to their own event.
I respond a little negative to that, because I don't, as an outsider, I still want to be on.
You're not excluded from.
Well, I know.
You can do both.
Yeah, no, I know. But I want to make sure, like, as an outsider, I get in on all the
Jim,
insider
Dave will
stuff
take
too.
your money. You can go to every event you want to go to.
Well, but it does, Ed, you bring up a great point, and I think it's knowing who's going where and who's doing what. And then for you, when we were talking about it yesterday, you're adding another, so say you add another event on, or you make today a bigger day than it is, and you're involved in that's another thing for you to worry about and to plan, right? Any thoughts on economizing that in some ways, or thinking of different ways so that you can do it where maybe you don't have to do that, or even the stores. I mean, the staff in the stores are working hard during this weekend too. If you ask them to do another one, any thoughts or ideas as you think through economizing that? I'll give you one example, is maybe just having the food all 100% catered. Right?
Yeah.
Somebody brings in food for that. You don't have to worry about it. They do all the setup. But any thoughts on that, Dave?
Well, it's unfortunate the way my mind works. It goes the opposite. You're saying, Dave, how do you make it easier for you? Where I'm looking at next year and saying, how about a party after the party? So the night was over, and some people went some places. And why can't they go back to my store at midnight and some manufacturer host the thing or whatever and do that? Or how about beforehand, everybody was in the parking lot, basically tailgating beforehand. Why don't we do something at the store and bring them there and just add more crap to my plate? But that's what I end up doing to myself. So I do need somebody. I need a psychiatrist on the other side saying, all right, calm down, you're getting older here, make it easier. But I want to make it better. You know, and unfortunately making it better requires it to be more complicated and more work. But I try to outdo myself, and people say it to me at the end of every single show that I do is, what are you going to do next year? How are you going to outdo yourself this time? You know, and right now that's in my mind, and I have to gear next year's up to make it better than this year's. And that goes for the podcast itself. Next week's show, I try to make better than this week's show. All this time, just try to keep improving little things, learning from other people, especially the School of Podcasting and stuff. You know, we were talking about Clubhouse a little while ago. Yes, I heard it on the show and said, what can I do? And we talk about the Cigar Authority podcast on our Clubhouse on Thursday nights. And we take some of the information we get, because we really get to talk to the listeners where we don't on our podcast. Here they are telling us, and then we bring that information. So we're you know, the after show on Wednesday, the Clubhouse on Thursday, and then the show is on Saturday.
And then
it just keeps going.
You know, the normal Tuesday is I'll stop by Dave's office. He'll say, did you hear? Ask the podcast coach. Should we be looking at this? Should we be doing this? So it's really a constant effort to change things and tune them and try to make the show better.
I'm an older dude, and you know what I see that happens I hear in all kinds of industries that they say, oh, the guy's old and stuff and he doesn't get with the times. And I said, I never want to be that guy. I want to move up with the times. And when the internet came in, we're the first ones doing it. We're barcoding things, and we were actually the second cigar company to have a website. And okay, get the website going. Now what's the next thing? And whatever the next thing is, podcasting. Nobody was doing it. Okay, I'm going to be a retailer doing podcasting. Whatever the next deal is, you guys mentioned Clubhouse. The next week I was like, okay, how do I set up Clubhouse, and what's the next thing to do?
Well, and you guys went through, and Dave Jackson, you and I, you know, we have a Clubhouse open, but we really haven't. I mean, it's there. Right. Besides the first couple of weeks we did it, we haven't gotten a lot of engagement.
Yeah, we had a ton when nobody could get into it, and everybody was talking about it. Like, how do I get in? How do I get in? So it was super hot. Right now we got Chris and Joel are listening in Clubhouse. I don't really promote it a lot. Like yesterday, I was so proud of myself because I actually made the room a day ahead of time. So if people happen to be looking for podcasting, they could find it and go, oh, add this to my calendar and things like that. I should, in fact, I'm going to. I can make that reoccurring. And the only reason I didn't was there was some weird rule that you had to have so many rooms before you could have a club. Well, now I have a club. They change the rules over there all the time. So I just need to make that reoccurring so people know it's there if they want to listen to it. But I know. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, let me say one of the things you guys did differently on Clubhouse that we didn't do is, and it wasn't a hit right away. Like I kind of was with you guys as you struggled to kind of figure out, like, what are we going to do with this thing?
I love that it's not recorded, because nobody hears that horrible stuff that you did here.
I think, but I think that's part of the secret to your success in a lot of ways. Is I hear you're having conversations on there with people who because they wouldn't say these kinds of things on a podcast. They'll say them on Clubhouse. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So, you know, this is industry people that are in there, and they may jump in and say something, and they say, well, this, you know, of course there's a whole bunch of people listening, and they'll say, well, this isn't for public Well, you're saying it public, but it's not recorded.
Yeah.
Therefore, it disappears and it's gone, and they
Right,
feel
right.
okay with that, or they question something, really specific industry stuff that somebody will say. But we kind of peel back the curtain a little bit on that show, and then we take that and bring it to the regular show.
I would just say never assume that it's not being recorded.
Yeah, well, of course, but
it's just because I mean I record stuff all the time. Somebody contacted this week because I played a small clip of Howard Stern in my last episode, and they said, "How are you doing that legally?" I said, "I'm not doing it legally." I go, "It's illegal." I said, "Now, if I were to get challenged on that, the defense I would use in court, and court is not cheap." I go, is I also talked about how I used it as an educational tool. I said, so that would be my defense. I said, but realize, yes, they could easily take me to court and say, hey, you played a clip from Sirius Satellite Radio and you didn't have the rights to do that. I said, so I'm taking a chance. And I go, now, do I think Howard Stern is listening to my podcast? Do I think no. If Benji Bronk might be, I used to email back and forth. He's one of the guys, one of his writers. I go, but so I always assume that is in Clubhouse. I always assume it's being recorded, and yet on the same hand, I also assume that nobody's listening to my podcast.
But inherently, though, the platform really is not a recorded
right.
platform. And so, what I've watched is now you guys get on there. It's Thursday nights, and you get a lot. You get a lot of folks to jump in there, and then. You said something about to me. It's a different kind of engagement than the podcast. Talk a little bit about that.
Because I want to engage, but in a podcast, there's really not a lot of that
besides the chat room, right?
Yeah, and it's a much smaller audience that are listening live Saturday afternoon. We get the bulk of our stuff that hits Monday morning, maybe Sunday night or something. People are listening to this stuff on their own time or whatever. But being able to talk to the person and the people that write into us and stuff, a lot of the stuff that happens on our show happened because the audience told us, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And I'll say when it comes out, oh my God, that's a great idea. Circle that idea. And it becomes mine at that point. There's no, hey, thanks for this. It becomes it's mine. It's that good. I joke with them that it's that good, but we incorporate it in because as a retailer, what you want to do is give the customer what they want. So they're coming right out and telling you this is what they want. How much easier can it be? Let's give them what they want instead of fight and say, no, I'm going to make them want this instead. No, just give them what you want. They'll say, okay, we'll give you that. And they take well to it.
I never will forget when I was working for the New Media Expo and the guy moved it to be it was a breadcrumb on the table of the NAB. And they separated the community. The courses were over here and the hangout area was over here. When we get done, and he's like, so what's the word on the street? And I go, well, I talked to a lot of people. I said, and since we moved here with the NAB, I go, I don't think it's a case where people hate change. I go, they really, really hated it. I go, I said, nobody could find anybody. It was too much walking. It was just decentralized. I go, absolutely. I didn't have one person that they said when we found the speakers, they were great. I said, so, okay, sounds like I did my job. I said, but all in all, they really hated the New Media Expo being part of NAB. And the owner looked at me and goes, well, that's too bad. He goes, because we're, and I was like, wow, he's just like, I don't care. And now, of course, he also.
But why did he ask the question? Why did he ask the question? He
exactly
got the answer he didn't want to hear, but.
Yeah, and
but sometimes we get down, we start going down a path of our own. Like, no, I want, especially in retail, I want my retail business to be this way. And when the customer starts saying, "Look, I'm going to buy it from you this way," right, they're ready to give you money, but I want you to do it this way. I think you got to take some of that feedback.
You have to pivot. You have to change up and stuff. And much like I said, as an older guy, no, this is the way we did it in the 60s back in the day. This is the way it was. People used to come in and they gave us coins, and that's how it worked. No, they give a credit card now. Well, we don't accept credit cards. Are you out of your mind? Because that's how people pay for things now. So change up or go out. That's it.
Yeah. You also get back to Clubhouse. You also get ideas or subjects from Clubhouse that then you bring into the after show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
It almost becomes the show now. I'd say 80% of the time, what is discussed on Clubhouse is, notes are taken during it. And I said, okay, we got something here. And that becomes the after show for the following week. And then the people in Clubhouse that are obviously a smaller group or something, they hear it, but we've cleaned it up a little. We've taken out what certain things were said. It's only a 20-minute after show.
Yeah.
And that becomes the Clubhouse. We go 1 hour.
Right.
It's the Cigar Power Hour is what we call it.
Right.
And that was because somebody wrote into our regular show and said, I love the Clubhouse thing. There's no advertising. There's no nothing. It's just a power hour of, and I go, that's good. Okay. Cigar Power Hour. And we got to figure a monetization of that. Haven't done that yet, but
it could
again, we got to build first.
It could be a lead generation tool too, right? I mean, not everything has to have, I know you disagree with that.
I'm an entrepreneur. This is what I do. At the end of it, it took 3.5 years for the first ad. 3.5 years for me to get the first ad, a 2-hour show every single week. So it's not like I'm one of those guys that say, okay, where's the money coming?
Yeah.
I'll wait and be patient, but at least I have to have a plan ahead to say, and this is how it's going to happen, which I don't have yet, but I'll get one.
Yeah. Yeah. 3.5 years, Dave. I was
going to say, well, how long was that again? Yeah, there's that 3 years again. Yeah.
We hear that all the time in podcasting, that it really kind of, that 3-year mark is kind of where things start for some, not everybody, but they start moving.
Yeah. Is there a Joe Rogan out there that boom, the guy blew up and stuff? Far and few between. I mean, it's and the majority of them are never going to make 3 years.
Right.
I mean, I don't know what the percentages of that.
Well, and Joe started in 1989. That's what most people forget. I'm like, he started his stand-up in 1989, and I forget, it was a lot of years before he even made like his first CD. I want to say it was like 4 years, and it took him, it took him a long time to get that 100 million. I'm like, he earned every penny.
That story, right? 10 years to get there.
Yeah.
Dave Jackson, you did this more. You used to do it more. You stopped yourself, and now I'm kind of wondering if we should come back to it, but you used to you'd float topics that you thought you were going to do on School of Podcasting, right?
Yeah.
And you'd float them in this show on Ask the Podcast Coach, right?
Yeah.
And then you felt bad about it because you got some feedback that people were hearing the same thing twice. Is that right?
Yeah. I got some feedback from people saying, hey, like I was there, I heard it on Ask the Podcast Coach, and you're doing it again on the School of Podcasting. So what I do now is a lot of times I will get the idea over here because I'm here with my live audience, and somebody will say, well, what about such and such? And I'll answer it here, and then I'll put it back in the oven. And like, let me really think about this a second, because that was off the top of my head. And what I try to do now is, if I'm going to cover the more or less the same subject, it's the same subject, but maybe at a slightly different angle and maybe a little deeper than just what you and I did off the top of our head.
Yeah.
So, but I had somebody say, hey, it's kind of a rerun. And I was like, I always assumed that they weren't listening to both shows, but they're like, no, we like you. And I was like, okay, well, that's great. But it was kind of different. But so, yeah, and there are times you'll hear me say it here. I'm like, hey, just for the record, I'm going to talk about this on the school. So I'm kind of letting you know this, I'm going to do this twice, because this is a good topic. Like, anytime I find a really cool tool or something like that, because I assume that people aren't listening to both, or in some cases, maybe I talked about a tool at the beginning of this show, but I talked about it at the end of the School of Podcasting. So maybe you didn't get it there, and things like that. And
or a deeper dive, you say, or you leave a little thing hanging. I'll get more deep into that on the School of Podcasting.
Yeah.
So some little thing hanging out there that let me check on that and get back to you on that. And you're going to bring the person over.
And I think there's some opportunities for cross promotion across those properties, right? As we think about even here, ours, Ask the Podcast Coach and School of Podcasting have that opportunity. And Dave, I was going to ask you, Dave Jackson, I was going to ask you, is it bad that you got that feedback from a listener? Like, if you think those two circles colliding, how many really listen to both? And just if you get one negative comment, like,
right,
that's
true. You're making a decision based on one person's feedback.
Yes. Do you look at Ask the Podcast Coach? Let me peel the curtain back just a little bit as the funnel into School of Podcasting.
That was the idea. I don't know that it's worked that way.
I don't think we work it that way, though, to be honest.
No, I don't. I work it more. This is more gearing people to become an awesome supporter than a member of the School of Podcasting when I think about that. It's also, yeah. So that just happened. That was just something like, hey, Patreon came out. Let's play with this thing. And it was like, all right, well, there you go. So,
but from a content perspective, I think we could do, Dave Jackson, I think we could do more that would funnel folks too. Although, you know, it would be interesting. This is where you guys do an annual survey, right?
Yeah.
And it would be, Dave, this would be an area like, what is that mix of, you know, who listens to Cigar Authority? Who listens to, you have another one called Ash Holes.
Yes.
And then Ash. Right. Then you've got the Clubhouse and you've got the after show.
Yeah.
And then so you're kind of starting to think through who's funneling into what, and you may even have a situation where you want it to go both directions, right? You want to take some Cigar Authority.
We even play with the people that watch us on YouTube and the people that listen to the podcast. Now that's two different people, a YouTube subscriber or something that gets that. So when we do the after show, it is only on audio. So we're talking about it during our show, and say we got a couple of thousand people that watch it on YouTube. The only way to get the after show is to be on audio only. But if you subscribe to Mewe, which, by the way, we're in tobacco, so we got thrown off of Facebook, and all kinds of different things happen over the years because we're a tobacco thing, and everybody knows how evil tobacco is. So we have to be careful of all those things. So I want people to subscribe in every aspect, because when we get thrown off, where do we find you at that point? You've already subscribed. If you're listening to the after show, the only way to do it is to listen, unless you're on Mewe, because what do? You end up recording that way anyway through YouTube.
I record the video and
pull the audio out of it.
Yeah, I end up.
So we have it. So we put it out there just as a gift for people to go to YouTube, Mewe, and then they can actually see the show, which airs on Wednesday. The after show doesn't air on Wednesday, but we put it on the people for Mewe on Tuesday, day early. So very, very quickly, we grew our Mewe audience because we gave them something special if they go there. And there's really nothing to look at anyway. But and because I believe that there's nothing to look at, it's an audio show. We said, all right, that's not enough to give them. You can see it. So let's just give it to them a day early.
Yeah.
So the video portion for just them shows up a day early, and then everybody else gets it there. But we bring it up. We say it during the regular show, and we watch our audience grow each and every way. So I want to grow, like you say, the shows, but I want to actually grow where they listen to this also in every aspect, because I'm afraid one of these people are going to throw us out, like YouTube. The other one is Odyssey. That again, I learn all this stuff from you guys. Thank you, and learn about the next platform, and then I go see Ed the next day. And, you know, usually on Tuesdays, I see Ed Tuesday morning, and I bring it up, and he smiles because he knows exactly where I heard it.
But
says,
then
he's got the information.
He doesn't always smile.
I say, thanks, Dave Jackson, for creating more work for me.
Well, nobody knows. When you said Mewe, right? I mean, like,
no one had heard of
who's
it.
Mewe, right?
Well, you want to watch Dave's head explode, check out, I'll just give my affiliate link. If you go to supportthishow.com/circle, I think it's circle.so or IO or something like that. It's basically your own Facebook that you can charge to get access to. And that way you don't have to worry about anybody kicking you off because you're paying for the platform. So, and you can actually let people, it's the thing that's cool about it is you can give people as much power to communicate with each other, or make it to where they only communicate with you, and you can make groups and polls, and it sends out a newsletter. Hey, here's what happened in the community that you missed, and all sorts of fun stuff. And it's funny because I keep interviewing people, and this is not on purpose, that have left Facebook and they've moved to Circle. So,
well, when you guys moved to Mewe, I was like, you guys are crazy.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, Mewe? And I reluctantly downloaded the app so I could be in there and such. But you're there. There's people there. There's conversation there, and so your listeners have moved there. I mean, there's a very active group.
Because and I say it to the audience, I'm afraid I was taken down off of Facebook.
Right.
We were taken off of Instagram. and there was talk about taking us down on YouTube because YouTube says you can't put commercial content in there. We have commercials during our show,
Right.
And we're tobacco.
Right.
So I go, okay, we're going down someday. Let's start building the next thing just in case.
And this is where it's critical for us to have relationships with the other podcasters in this space, right? Because someone will write to Dave and say, hey, YouTube just demonetized. So we start to get an idea of where this is going because we're all sharing our experience.
And you wanted to pull it out so that we got our old content, because the second Facebook took me down, I lost every picture of my graduation and everything that I had ever put up, gone. And now 12 years of the Cigar Authority that are all on YouTube, it's going to be gone. If the day they click the button, it's over.
It's already on Odyssey, though.
Yeah, he moved it over to Odyssey. Which took a while, but it's done.
Tiana wants to know if you have a mailing list. I would assume you do. A big one, I would think.
Yeah.
So,
Dave, Dave Jackson, while you're queuing up the awesome supporters, for that, that mailing list, you guys in Cigar Authority just came up with a one sheet kind of flavor wheel, right?
Yes.
And then one of the things to get that, I get your email address.
Yeah. So we talked about this flavor wheel that I created, and we talk about the flavors on it. Then I said, just go to thecigarauthority.com and click flavor wheel, and we'll send you a free flavor wheel. So the page they get to says, what's your name and address? So they're assuming I'm going to mail it to them. What's your email address? Thank you. And now we send it by email.
Right.
But now I have your name and address, and I have everything.
And pretty simple. Just a page.
Yeah.
Right. Just you made a page.
That's it.
That people download.
And now they print it. Right. And that adds to it.
The other one was it's both things, right? For audience engagement, now as part of the show, we do a weekly poll question of the week. When you go to answer that, we collect an email address and then count their vote in the weekly poll.
Yeah.
Nice.
The first customer that ever came in a Two Guys Smoke Shop in 1985, I said, what's your name and address? So this has been going on for 36 years. If you can't get a hold of your customer, trying to get the new customer is so much work. The guy already came in, and now there's no way to have a conversation with them, no way to send a thank you card, an email, nothing.
Yeah.
What a shame. And you go back to it 10 years later, and you'll say, I wish I did. So start collecting it. You don't be a pain in the butt and send them stuff.
Or spam them.
Yeah.
Or spam them.
But at least you're able to get a hold of them and customer service them. Tell them something they're looking for. Oh, my God, we have a new show, blah, 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 blah. Just want you to know. Here you go, whatever. And all of a sudden, like when we started Mewe, we go from 0 to 300 people in 1 second. That's because we have a mailing list already to say, as opposed to start with number 1 again. Here we go. Your raging fans. If you get a hold of your raging fans, you can tell them and they'll do it.
Right.
Well, and speaking of raging fans and people we want to say thank you to.
Before you do that, can you give me a quick pour?
Give you another pour? Yeah, absolutely. You guys are thirsty.
What time? Unbelievable time.
Hey, can you do a double one?
Sure. There we go. You ready?
Thank you.
I can't see what I'm doing, but that's
it's so perfect.
But we want to thank James over at the Dog Podcast Network. If you haven't checked it out, what are you waiting for? If you got a pooch of some sort, go over and check it out. He's got the Dog Authority. He's got, especially if your dog has, this is kind of a downer, but it's talk about a niche. If your dog has cancer, he's actually got a podcast about that. Everything. If you have a dog, you got to check it out. dogpodcastnetwork.com. And we always thank our $20 supporters. And we definitely want to thank Michael Delaney from babymountainradio.com. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. I said he's been donating, but somehow didn't show up as a donator in Patreon. And so I removed him from the list, and Mike was like, hey, you're still taking my money. What's the deal? So I said, I will mention you first, babymountainradio.com. Thank you, Michael, for being an awesome supporter. The Indie Drop-In Network, if you have a true crime, a comedy, or a scary kind of story, he's got a whole audience over there that loves that stuff. You contact Greg, and he will put your episode into their network and help you grow your audience. Shane over at Tourpreneur. If you operate a tour business or plan on starting one, this podcast is for you. Glenn the Geek Hebert over at horseradionetwork.com. If you have horsies, go over and check out Glenn. He's got, I think, about 17, 18 different shows over there, all about horses. Some weird guy named Ed Sullivan. You may have heard of him. You've actually heard him this week over at soniccupcake.com. Ed, what do you do over there at soniccupcake.com?
Dave, I do stuff over there, but what I actually wanted to say here is, even listening to the show today, I get a lot of value from this show. And, I would encourage listeners to support people that are providing value to you.
You tip the waitress, brings you a cup of coffee that you paid for. You didn't pay anything for this.
Listen, I'm not naming names out there, but there's a lot of people out in this audience that come here for entertainment as much as for informational value. And there's a price for that too. Support the people that are giving you enjoyment and information. I do podcast stuff, Dave. It's sort of interesting. Every time you read it, you say, well, if you want your show edited, I barely accept any new people, because
Ed doesn't like to work. Let's just be really clear.
You know what it is, Jim? I only work on stuff that really interests me at this point. So I do the cigar stuff, I do comedy stuff, a couple of other things, but unless I enjoy the content, it's not even worth doing for me.
Well, thanks for supporting the show, Ed. Appreciate it.
We appreciate that. Felix over at the Latin Podcast Awards. This has been around since 2017. It's dedicated to enhancing the visibility of the Latinx podcast. Check it out, LatinPodcastAwards.com. Max Trescott up in the air at aviationnewstalk.com. So if you're a pilot or if you're into aviation, check him out, aviationnewstalk.com. And I skipped one there by accident. KJST Media. It's an LGBTQ plus founded company focused on helping all levels of podcasters to grow their podcast. Check him out.
I would encourage people, if they need some editing done, support these folks who are supporting you.
There we go. KJSTmedia.com. Greg over at Debt Shepherd, where he is teaching financial wellness. Kim at Toastmasters101.net. So if you're looking to develop your voice, reduce your editing time, or improve your content, Toastmasters101.net. And if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And if you want to just do a one-time donation, you can go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/store. So thanks to all of our awesome supporters for that. We deeply appreciate it.
I am barely even awesome, and even I support the show.
That's funny.
Dave Garofalo, let me ask you this question on advertising, because we just did an ad. We did our ad.
Yes.
You have 3 segments during your show that you bring. Would you let another podcast that's tobacco related be an advertiser on your podcast?
I think I would. It's never happened and nobody's asked, but we have advertisers that we don't carry their product. And I say to them when they came forward and said, I'd like to advertise on the show, I said, that doesn't mean I'm going to carry your brand. It's not that simple, or whatever it is. And they said, I realize that, but you have an audience, and it's not about, which is great that they don't think our show is about the sales within our company. It is national and international at that point. And we've had some for years, and we still don't carry their product. And there's their advertising that's in it, and they don't stop, so they're getting value out of it. And that's the win-win. If you're, when it comes to a podcast advertising on a show, and I'm not cheap, it's expensive to advertise, I would kind of talk them out of it and saying, there's people love, this is many people listen to me, but you can't put that in the bank. How many people listen? How many likes?
Right.
I'd like to deposit some likes, please.
Doesn't work that way.
So, I don't think that is a good idea. We do, and it started years ago as a share cross, whatever we end up calling a magazine, Cigar Journal magazine. We do a commercial for them, and they put an ad in their magazine for us, which was really good because it's an international publication done in 3 languages. So, we got known in Germany and Spain big time because we're advertising in there, but it doesn't cost me anything. and we advertise for them. So that's works both ways.
What happens when you have a guest who is in the industry and, might represent company A, and then you got a company B advertisement right down below there at the same time? Does that get awkward?
It happens every week.
Yes.
Except when Nick Perdomo is on the show.
So we have segments of things happen, much like your coffee pour, right? That all of a sudden it's there. So you're doing a coffee pour on somebody's podcast, and I have my own podcast,
right?
And here you are talking to me while you're advertising somebody else. Right. Well, one of our things is we cut the cigar, brought to you by blah blah blah. I'm sitting there with the owner of brand B. Right. And I'm talking about brand A, and while he's cutting the cigar, and cutting his cigar is brought to you by his competitor. Right? How weird is that? But it works. It works.
It works.
Yeah.
No, it does work. And I think some podcasters would get very weird for them, and it still may have some weirdness. But
sometimes it does, depending if the guy's not friendly with the other guy, and I feel a little.
Everybody gets along in the tobacco industry, right?
There's no competition.
Love fest.
You were at the anniversary party. Dave had 16 of the biggest manufacturers of tobacco products at his party, and they were all hanging out together, talking to each other. So
no fist fights in the parking lot.
No, and at the end of the night, that they go back to trying to
destroy each other.
Yeah.
Right. That's it. Well, and that's where you could always, if you wanted to, if you had something like a Patreon or something like that, you could always put a line that we reserve the right to, limit the whatever, give yourself an ad if you really wanted to. But my whole thing, I go back to the days of being a musician. We used to be friends with other bands because they would let us know if a new club opened up or something like that. And we would do the same thing. And I'm like, look, if I had Melissa, who's she worked for Teachable. She's kind of a course guru, and she's also a podcast consultant. And I just go with the thing like, look, if you've been listening to me for 16 years and you decide to go with her, that's on me. That's not on her. It's like somehow I have failed you. I have not built enough of a relationship with you that you wanted to hire me to launch your podcast. And that's where I got to look at myself and go, okay, what can I do better? Because as a band, we were like, we just want to be better than everybody else. And so, we're like, oh yeah, we're fine talking about these guys because we think we're better. So, and that doesn't mean I think I'm the best, but to me, it's like, I think we can learn from everybody and get insights and things like that. So if for some reason somebody goes to somebody else, I'm like, well, all right, well, let's look at why they did that.
A different style.
That's true.
Style or whatever it is. It's
well, it's funny because Daniel J. Lewis and I are friends, and we've both sent emails to each other. It's like, well, I started listening to Daniel, but I don't know, that guy's kind of dry. And then he had one where the guy had said, oh, I was listening to Dave, but man, that guy's kind of goofy, and it's like, so, but they found the perfect person. Daniel's very much a deep dive with all sorts of facts, and I'm much more of, goofiness. I embrace my goofiness. So
absolutely.
Dave Jackson, we got a comment in the chat saying today's show is really different. I like Jim's location today. Dave, as you clear that cough and get some liquid in there.
Yeah.
How important is the sound stage here? I mean, this was intentional, right? And Ed, back up a little bit if you would on the screen, just so folks kind of get to see. How important is this, and how do you use it more than just a place to record a podcast?
I want it to look professional for the people that come in and actually look at it. Also, the manufacturers that come in as a guest or something to come in and look. Again, I charge a lot of money for advertising. I want it to look a certain way, but we're on the second floor of a cigar shop.
Yeah.
And we started this thing with folding tables and sitting on the floor of the sales floor, and people walking by us saying, what the hell is going on here?
Asking questions.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of the podcast.
But I think everything should look as professional and proper as it possibly can. When I bought this stage, very expensive to buy this stuff. And the lady was asking me about it, and they said, what station is this for? And I said, no, I'm putting a podcast studio together. And she said, oh, I'm sorry, that's not what you want. And then she shows me something else. And I said, no, that's exactly what I want. And I actually had a fighter to allow this. I said, don't let your boss hear you talking like this. Just sell me this. And I don't understand. But now I'm able to, this is a podcast studio. I built it for me, but it's sitting there. And then somebody says to me one day, what a shame. It sits here 6 days a week, 23 hours.
Yeah.
And it's just sitting here. And, you know, you should make this available for other people. So now there's a whole bunch of podcasters that come here and do their show from here. So, you know, you figure that out as it goes on, but it was made just for me.
Yeah.
So it would look this nice. And again, it's a podcast. It's not a video thing. It's a podcast. But YouTube is the #2 search engine,
right,
to Google. So there's a whole bunch of people listening to this show right now on YouTube.
Yeah.
So how much can you get out of that, and your show notes and all these things that can drive somebody to the next thing? After a long period of time, it's worth it. Is it worth it day one? No. My God, geez. I have a pizza oven in my yard. Cost me, say, $10,000 for this pizza oven. Well, the first time I made a pizza, they said, how's the pizza? I said, it's terrible. $10,000 for that first pizza. Second one, there, $5,000. It's never going to be worth the pizza, but it's the whole overall experience. What's the value to it overall? And it's the look of it. And here I am on Ask the Podcast Coach, a show about podcasting, and you're showing my set. Have you ever showed anybody else's set before?
No.
So look at the value of that.
Right.
And maybe there's somebody in New England somewhere that says, geez, I want to look like that, and I don't have $100,000 to do. Okay, come here and you can do your show at Studio 21.
Right.
Yeah. Craig wants to know if that's a non-smoking area.
It can be. Right now, it's not. I'm looking at an audience of smokers in front of me.
I was just typing an answer. I would say generally it is not a smoking area, with the exception of the cigar podcasts, but the barbecue guys love to have a cigar on their show. So smoking is optional but encouraged.
Yeah, and
it's up to the person that rented it out.
And I kind of thought through this too. Like, should we be smoking a cigar today on Ask the Podcast Coach? And I kind of defaulted to like, no, that's kind of not our normal thing here. We did coffee pour and some other things. So I kind of said, yeah, let's not. There's Cigar Authorities coming on right after this, and folks will be here to do that. But that was kind of my choice. That felt like that stepped outside of Ask the Podcast Coach a little too much at that point, maybe.
People log in, they're like, I got the wrong channel. What's going on?
Ed's off screen, and he was puffing on a cigar. But
the off-camera talent, maybe.
So, but that was something I kind of thought through a little bit. Like, do we want to do that?
Right.
And trying to stay in the feel of what we normally do here. It may be, and you guys on Cigar Authority have a pretty. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. What we've done, you've done liquor tastings like bourbon and whiskey and some of those kinds of things. You've had food on there. I brought soda the last time I was in here, and we talked about that. So that opens up. Anything you wouldn't do on the podcast on the Cigar Authority? Anything you wouldn't do?
There's nudity.
Thought you wouldn't. Well, Dave, there was one particular episode where Mr. Jonathan had a few too many drinks, and while he wasn't nude, he was down to his briefs.
Okay.
And yet there's a counter here, but the worst spot of all, he was sitting there.
Yeah.
And the person who had it the worst was Ed over there.
I was a producer. I had a view that
I don't want to sit in this chair anymore.
All right. I can't.
Ed, can you bring me a new chair?
I can't unsee that. No, it's interesting because Cigar Authority, the vibe of it is a lounge experience. People coming to sit with their friends and talk about a variety of topics. So we often get into the food thing, which is why Dave created something with and for our audience.
Which is what?
Well, you remember you made that cookbook?
The Cigar Authority cookbook. So we just launched it. I asked some of our listeners, the raging fans, I sent them out an email, and also the manufacturers of cigars and all of us on our show, in the Ashholes, in the after show, and said, okay, everybody send me so many words about the recipe, and put the ingredients in, and then take a good picture of the finished dish. I compiled it all. I made a 120-page book, the Cigar Authority cookbook, and all the money goes to a charity. And the book is now on Amazon. It's on Barnes & Noble. It's on the cigarauthority.com. And it's only been maybe a week or so that it's out there. But we put a cookbook out. It wasn't a lot of heavy lifting, to be honest with you, because everybody did their page, right? So we were able to fill it up. And I had to, have it edited and all that. So there was a little expense to it. But it's a marketing tool where we're pairing the dish with a cigar on top of it. The raging fans will see how they like it, if they feel that they need to buy that and have something like that. But it was just another engagement of the listener, and another, you'll see it. You've been here before when they do it. The people come up, they know me, they like me, they trust me, and they know all of us, and we don't know them, because they're listeners of the show, but they do feel like they know us. Yeah. So I'm just trying it out. It's another form of engagement. We talked about some things coming up in the future that we talked about. How do we continue to engage with the listener and be part of our little social club, which is the lounge experience, like Ed said. That's what we do.
Hey, I know you guys, we're doing a post show, but you guys can't. You guys got to run and get ready for your show. So I wanted to get this question in. Could you publish a private video on YouTube and then embed it on your website and not get in trouble with YouTube? And I was
no. You can certainly publish the video on your website, which we do. But if YouTube gets to the point where they deem there is content they don't want, your channel's going to be removed from YouTube. When your channel's gone, it's still not going to help you.
Yeah, and that doesn't make a lot of sense, because you're trying to take advantage of the search engine capabilities in YouTube.
Yeah.
If you make those stuff private,
it doesn't show up.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You could still do that.
We do it, in fact.
Do it. Yeah.
It's not private in this case,
right?
But
Yeah.
Well, I want to pimp something else, because Ken says, man, that cigar dude is a genius. Check out Dave's book, David versus Goliath: How to Compete and Beat the Online Giant. And it's for brick and mortar stores, but there's a lot of stuff in there that you can use and apply it to your podcast. It's a great book, and that also is available at Amazon.
Well, we had Dave Groffo on the podcast last year when I was out here, and we talked a bunch about that book. So if folks want to get more, if you love these ideas, we kind of talked about some ideas out of the book and got in. That would be a good one to go back to. Dave Groffo, any other engagement ideas as we think about the last 2 minutes? How about a 1 minute idea? Anything off the top of your head when you think about audience engagement we haven't talked about?
We do a poll of the week. We do emails. We read a few emails and we give somebody a prize each time. One thing we're working on, those that are in the audience are going to hear it for the first time, that we kind of worked it together the other day of, we're going to make a challenge coin.
Yeah.
And we'll make one with an advertiser on the other side of it, which we call the front. The back side is us. It's a coin. It could go either way, right?
Yeah.
And we'll have it so that they have that. And if they bump into the manufacturer during that course of that year, they'll get a little something from them. And we'll give this out to our care package people. That's the people that buy the cigars weekly that we're going to smoke during the show. And then we'll hopefully turn that years into something that they wish they had that first coin. And whole evolved. Barry, who's sitting here in the audience, brought it to my attention a week or so ago. It evolved over the week, talking with you and everything. And how do we turn this into more than just that? And engagement is going to be part of it. That they're going to engage with other fans of the show, I hope. This is what military does, so it's not a new idea or anything, but taking it to a podcast is probably new, unless you've heard somebody else do that. But you guys that are doing podcasts, do it. Do it.
Yeah. Dave, thanks for hosting us, and thanks for hosting After the Podcast.
My honor. Again. Thank you.
Ed, thanks for hosting me.
Absolutely.
For an actual place to stay, it's pretty great. Hanging out with Ed Sullivan is always awesome. So,
and Dave, where can we find all your stuff?
2guyscigars.com, the number 2guyscigars.com if you want cigars. If you want books and things like that, it's davidgaroppolo.com or Amazon and all those places or whatever. But the hell with Amazon. davidgaroppolo.com. And the United Podcast Network is where we network all the shows that happen here. So you can check that out also.
Nice. Jim, are you doing an episode this week?
No, I took the week off. I'm here.
I'm going to say you're on the road.
Yeah, no, I took the week off. How about you, Dave?
This week, I believe I'm going to do the episode I've been talking about for like a month and a half, and that is breaking down the different features of the different podcast hosts. Because I saw somebody this morning that said, like, what's the difference between a free and a paid host? And the answer is, what's the difference of, let's say I had a flat road in Oklahoma and a flat road in Arizona, and I took the same Corvette and put it there. It's not going to go any faster. It's the same thing. It's all the features on top of it that make the difference. So I'm going to break that down and kind of, which will go over well. I'm going to Pittsburgh next week, so maybe while I'm there, they'll be like, hey, that last episode, you're fired. We'll see. So, but stick around. We are going to, Jim and Dave have to run to do their show, but we are going to do some post show here. So feel free to stick around. I see I got a question that we're going to talk about. So thanks everybody for showing up. Stick around for some post show.